What's going on, everyone? DSP here, and welcome to the Hateful Truth. Today I'm going to be talking about a very unique game in regards that I've never played one like it before. It's an episodic adventure split up into 5 parts that were actually released starting back in January of 2011 all the way through July if you were playing it on the PS3. I believe they came out a little bit quicker if you had actually gotten the PC version. And of course I'm talking about the Telltale Games point-and-click adventure game Back to the Future, the video game. And I really want to talk about this game because for me it's part game and also part nostalgia. I grew up in the 80s, and those were the times when I feel like a lot of the classic movie trilogies were coming out. You had Star Wars, which started in the 70s, continued into the 80s. You had Indiana Jones movies. You had Back to the Future. You had Ghostbusters, which started in the 80s. All these really classic movie franchises that I've really enjoyed when I was growing up. And Back to the Future is one of my favorites. In fact, probably one of my favorite adventure movies, if not probably contender for my favorite series of adventure movies / kind of sci-fi movies ever. And the thing that was really neat about this game is when it was announced, they right off the bat announced that they were going to get Christopher Lloyd to reprise his role as Doc Brown and do all the voice work for Doc Brown in these games. And therefore, I was really excited. I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't get Michael J. Fox to do the voice of Marty McFly. But I was also pleasantly surprised to find out that Michael actually does do a cameo role as future, he does do future Marty for one scene, but he also does a ancestor of Marty as well, and he does the voice. Now, obviously, you know, Michael J. Fox, he is ill, he has Parkinson's disease, so there was no way he was going to be able to probably take on the voice work of doing Marty for all 5 of the episodes. So it was cool just to see him in that cameo role and to have a part of this. And one other thing that's important to say is the woman who actually played as Jennifer, who's Marty's girlfriend in the Back to the Future movies, reprises her role as Jennifer in these games as well. So right off the bat, if you're nostalgic like me for these movies, you're going to love the fact that they got a lot of the original cast to be back in them. Now, what exactly does these games entail? What kind of a game is it? Well, if you ever play any of these point-and-click adventure games like Sam and Max, Adventure of Monkey Island, that kind of stuff, that's exactly what this game pretty much is. Now what they've done is it's kind of a 3D graphical style. The graphics are a little bit cartoony, and the controls themselves, this isn't like a fully interactive action game where you need to be responsive and time your inputs. It's more about finding the right thing to click on the screen at the right time to advance the story, possibly finding some hidden items and figuring out how to use them to get certain things done. It's a pretty standard point-and-click fare. If you're looking for anything more than that, you probably are going to be disappointed, because primarily what this kind of game is meant to do is to advance a story and really give you an extended movie. And really what this game does and excels at is taking the canon story from the Back to the Future trilogy of movies and extending it into a series of 5 pretty short, but usually around 3 hours long games or episodes. So overall, the gameplay of this entire game is roughly about maybe 15 hours, probably a little bit less than that. I'd probably say 12 to 13 hours. And that's pretty damn good for the price tag. The actual cost of this game is only $20 to get all 5 episodes. So if you're looking for a bang for your buck, this is it. $20 to continue the actual, official story of Back to the Future and to get a pretty decently long game. And they do a really good job. I think really they nail the personality of the characters of Doc Brown and Marty, and the plot itself is really interesting. Obviously there's I don't want to give too much about the plot away, but basically you have to go back in time to save Doc. Doc is trapped in the past of 1931, and he's in jail. And over the course of the story, you find out there's certain reasons why this happened. There's a mystery involving a fire at a speakeasy. You don't know who's done it, and it looks like Doc Brown might be framed for it. And then as the story progresses over the course of the episode, you end up going, to the future. You end up actually going further back in time. You actually end up seeing several alternate timelines, which is pretty neat. And it really is a really interesting story, very reminiscent of the story of the original Back to the Future trilogy of movies. And so if you are a fan of those movies, you are going to want to play these games. They're going to give you such a great feeling of nostalgia that even if you dislike the gameplay, you're still going to like this game, okay? The gameplay isn't complex. Like I said, it's standard point-and-click fare. There are a couple of problems, to be completely fair. I'd say number one, again, if you're playing this just for gameplay, you're probably going to get bored pretty quick because it's really not about the gameplay. It's about getting through the gameplay in order to get to the next part of the story. Some of the gameplay can be cryptic, to the point where there were one or two points where I was just completely stumped as to what exactly I was supposed to be doing. And it's either because the game isn't self-explanatory enough of exactly what you should be doing at that point in time, or it's because you're in a really complex part of the game where there's a multi-step puzzle and there's just not enough clues to really figure it out. Now, if that is the case, don't worry, because there actually are in-game hints that you can use. And obviously, yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, you could just blow through the game doing in-game hints and just really quickly get through the gameplay parts, or you could really try to rack your brain and figure out what you're supposed to be doing on your own. So there's really different ways to play the game, whether or not you're doing it for gameplay, whether you're doing it just for the story, or if you want to actually get the complete experience. Personally, when I was playing this game, I 99% of the time really wanted to solve everything by myself, which I ended up doing. There was maybe only one or two times when I was really stumped and I had to use the hint system to try to figure out what I was supposed to do. And a lot of the time it was because, just like I said, it really wasn't self-explanatory on the screen what I was supposed to be doing, and it was a little bit too cryptic. The other problem, I would say, it is a little bit slow-moving, meaning if you're not the kind of person that if you're playing a game you like to talk to everyone and get all the dialogue options out, you're probably not going to like this game because it's really about fleshing out the backstory, the different things going on with the characters in the story. And a lot of the characters in the story are Marty's relatives, his people from the past, people from the present, alternate timeline versions of the people that he knows, and really understanding how traveling through time and making these minute changes in the timeline can actually change everything. So if you like that, if you like a lot of dialogue options and interesting backstory, this is your kind of game. Again, if you're an action-oriented kind of gamer, you're probably not going to like this game. The one other complaint that I do have is that there are a couple of minor problems with control. There's one or two points where you're walking down a street and then all of a sudden the set camera angle will change to a different direction, and then you're walking the wrong way because you were holding up, but then it switches to the side view and now you're walking sideways by accident even though you're still holding the same direction. And the control can be a little bit weird in that regard. But once you get past those minor control issues and you get used to the way that the game flows, it's really not that much of a problem. So graphics-wise, it's kind of cartoony. It's not going to impress you, but it gets the job done. Voice work is excellent, having a lot of the cast reprising their roles, and the other people who are new additions to the cast are excellent in all of their voice work. It's not it's not Resident Evil level voice work, you know what I mean? This is really good. This is meant to be like dialogue spoken for a movie, per se. Gameplay leaves a little bit something to be desired, but if you're used to this point-and-click kind of gameplay, you're going to be satisfied. Overall, as a package, I think the game is a pretty good value. Like I said, being it only costs $20 and you're going to get about 12 to 15 hours of gameplay out of it, it's really like watching a new trilogy of movies. That's kind of what I equate this to. It's like almost a new Back to the Future trilogy of movies, only it's not a trilogy, there's actually 5 episodes. And yeah, it does drag out a little bit to the point where there are some parts, man, I wish I could just get past this part because they're really making me do 10 steps to get this done when I wish it could have been 3 steps. So it does drag a little bit on there, and at 1 or 2 points the story does get boring. I'd say probably around episode 2 out of 5, or about halfway through the episode, you're like, man, this is kind of boring, but then it really picks up in episode 3 and really holds on to you till the end. So overall, what do I think about this game? I think for what it is, being that we all knew this was going to be a point-and-click style game, it wasn't going to be a retail release with action and big, crazy graphics that blow you away. We just knew it was going to be something true to the original trilogy of movies, having the people reprise their roles. You're basically getting a new Back to the Future story. If that's what you're looking for, this is your game, okay? If you're not necessarily a fan of Back to the Future, you still might like this trilogy. This game with the 5 episodes. I did get messages from a couple people who said, Phil, I actually had never watched the Back to the Future movies, but I started watching your playthrough of this Back to the Future game, and by episode 3, I was sold. I loved it. I loved the whole mechanic of being able to go through time and changing things in the past and the future, and how everything ties together, and the adventure and the sci-fi aspect of it. And I went and I watched the original movies, and I love the movies, so thank you for turning me on to the movies. So if you were a fan of that kind of adventure story, sci-fi kind of adventure, that is really the kind of people that are going to enjoy this game. If you're action-oriented, if that's what you're looking for, this is not what you're going to want. You're going to totally hate this game. So, for what it is, it excels. It's not the best point-and-click game, that's for sure. There have definitely been better point-and-click games. But for being basically fan service to the original trilogy of films and finding a way to turn it into an interactive experience to basically make a continuation of the Back to the Future story when we know there's pretty much no chance of them ever continuing that in a movie form, this is excellent. And this is just A+ for doing that. It excels at doing that. But I can't just review it as a fan of Back to the Future. That would be completely unfair of me to say, oh, it's a 10 out of 10 because it continues the story and it has the same voices and I love it. I have to really rate it in comparison to other games, in comparison to what's out there right now, and exactly what it is. And so, being completely fair, gameplay-wise, the game isn't that good. It's a point-and-click game, and there are better point-and-click games. There are far worse point-and-click games, don't get me wrong. But there's just not much substance there. It's not like this is a game you're going to play through once and say, man, that was so much fun, I can't wait to get back and play that again. Once you play it through once, that's pretty much it. You know where the story's going, you know what all the answers are to all the puzzles, and there's no reason for you to really go back, unless you want to be like a completionist and find every single trophy or every achievement in there. And there are a couple that I missed. There are some hidden things, like for example, one trophy that I got in this last episode of this game was talk to everyone at the science fair. Now, you wouldn't have known that you could get a trophy for doing that. You don't necessarily have to talk to everyone at the science fair because they don't all have anything to do with the story and actually progressing the story. And so it's just an optional thing for you to do. But if you're a completionist, that might be a reason for you to go back and possibly play the game again. But besides stuff like that, there's really no reason to go back and play the game. So you have to understand, you're going to pay $20, you're going to play through this once, and you're never going to go back to it. And so when you compare the gameplay and the fact that there's really zero replay value, and you compare that to the other games that are out today, I have to say, for the price point, this is good, but it's not going to be a game you're going to want to drop anything else to play unless you're a really hardcore fan of Back to the Future. So, overall, how do I score the Back to the Future, the video game? I would have to say I do have to give them some extra credit for, number one, staying very close to the story and actually continuing the official story of the films. And number two, I didn't see any plot holes by the end of this game. And I was fully expecting that by the end, when you have a time travel mechanic like this, there's usually plot holes up the ass. I didn't see any. So it wrapped up very nicely. The one thing that is kind of weird is the ending, and I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't already seen my playthrough or who hasn't played the game, but the ending is kind of peculiar, but it definitely leaves it open to a sequel for a game. Actually, at the end, it actually says to be continued. It doesn't say the end or anything like that. It says to be continued, as if they intend to possibly make another series of games, which would be neat, because it is a cliffhanger ending, as they always do with the Back to the Future games. So, how would I score this game? I would have to say, overall, as an overall game, meaning if I were rating it against every game that I've played this year, there's not a lot to this game, okay? It's very simple. Again, it's more of like an interactive movie than anything else, and the gameplay is really just an excuse to progress along what's going on with this interactive movie as opposed to actually having a game. And let's face it, it's 2011, point-and-click games. Yeah, some people still like them, but they are becoming outdated. But I liked what they did with this one. But in comparison to everything else, it's not complex, it's very simple, it's not a game, it's not a game like with any replayability at all. So honestly, an honest Hateful Truth review for this game, I'm going to actually have to give it a 6.5. It could have done a lot better if there were more gameplay to it, maybe if there was some action gameplay to it where you could perfect it and maybe, I don't know, drive the DeLorean around, I don't know, I'm just throwing something out there. But I'm just saying, the gameplay is okay, but at the same time, the story is excellent. I think this is... there's a niche, or a niche, I always forget how to pronounce that word, but there is a market for this game, and it's not only fans of point-and-click games, but it's people who are fans of Back to the Future, and also people who like adventure and sci-fi stories. Those are the kinds of people that will like this game. And it definitely, I think, I'm hoping, I haven't seen sales numbers, but I'm hoping that it at least was semi-successful to the point where they might consider actually doing either a full-fledged Back to the Future game that maybe has action aspects, or maybe they'll just do a sequel to this one that's another point-and-click game. Even that would just be neat to, again, to continue the story of these classic characters that you came to know and love back in the 80s. So, That's it. 6.5 for Back to the Future, the video game. A noble effort, a great way to continue the story, especially if you're a fan. This is a must-have. But if you're not so much a fan of Back to the Future, and if you don't like point-and-click gameplay, you're probably going to want to stay away. Okay? So that's it. That is the Hateful Truth game review for Back to the Future. And I plan on doing a lot more of these in the near future, so stay tuned, and I will see you later.